Hey guys, today we've got a Corsa VXR that's coming into the workshop, but before we get into our video, we just want to say a big thank you to our subscribers so far. But if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We make how-to and explainer videos, so if you think this is for you, then please subscribe, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment down below, and we'll do our best to get back to you. For now, let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome to another M10 video. Today we've got a Corsa VXR that's in for rear brake noise. I've had a little look and what I can see is that the driver's side rear has worn all the way down to metal to metal. So that means the material that's on the rear pads has completely worn away because it's been constantly on, and that means that the metal backing plate is pressing up against the metal of the disc. So the other side has plenty of meat left on it, so I'm assuming when I start stripping it down we're going to find that the caliper is seized, so that might need replacing as well. So let's take a little look. So using a 13mm spanner, we can take off the caliper bolts. There's only two holding this on, but looking at the whole assembly as it is, you can see that there's a red tinge around the disc, and that's normally a sign of overheating. These rear calipers can be kind of stuck in place, so have a little lever bar in order to free it all up. The rear caliper has the flexi that's attached to it, but also has the handbrake cable that's fixed to the back. So because of this, you don't have a lot of free play when it comes to moving the caliper around to work. So just put it to one side and make sure nothing gets damaged. Now that we've removed one pad, we can see that there's next to nothing left. It's about time that we've actually come to replace these pads. But when we take out the other side, you can see where it's been worn down to the metal and has been gouging into the disc. You can clearly see here where it's been touching through metal to metal, and that's what's giving us our brake noise. Now that the pads are out of the way, it's a good opportunity to wind back the piston on the caliper. This is a wind back tool. It's all old and really used, but this tool has never let me down. So let's fit it into place. You can see that there's two tabs in the old piston and there's two tabs on my tool. What you want to do is line those up, because that's what's going to grab on when you start turning the threads. Place the tool into the slots and adjust up any free play. It's worth mentioning that at the minute we're working on the right hand rear side of the car, and this is a right hand thread. On the passenger rear, so the left hand rear side of the car, it's a left hand thread, so you'll need another tool with an opposite thread in order to wind that back. You can see here that I'm struggling to wind it back just because the piston itself is seized and it's going to need replacing. While we're waiting for that part to arrive, we can replace the rear pads and discs. The pad carrier is held on with two 17mm bolts. These bolts are very prone to corrosion, so just be careful not to round anything. When this is removed, it's a good idea to give it a good clean up and replace the metal shims that the pads sit on. Using a Torx 30 and an impact driver, you can take off the bolt holding on the disc. And a few taps on the old disc should release it. With the disc removed, we now have a better view of the damage that the pad did. Moving to inside the car, we want to de-adjust the handbrake so we have as much slack at the caliper as possible. Just by lifting up this cover, you can see a 10mm adjuster which you can undo with a ratchet. Using a 13mm and a ratchet, we can now wind back the caliper handbrake lever, and now with the slack that we've just given the handbrake cable, we can just pop that out of place. When you've released the cable from the lever, you need to take it out of this little bracket that it's fed through. It can kind of be seized in there, so it's quite tight, so using a screwdriver, you should be able to prise it out. Once that's detached, you can just set it to one side so it's not in your way, and you can clamp off the brake pipe. This is a special brake pipe clamping tool so that when I take off the pipe, it won't leak out. Using a 13mm spanner, we can crack off the flexi pipe from the caliper, but we want to be careful to rotate the caliper only and not the flexi pipe, because you don't want to twist it. With the caliper removed, we can kind of see how it all works and what's gone wrong. That piston is stuck too far out, which will apply too much pressure to the brakes. But fluid is normally fed through here, pressure builds and pushes that piston out to apply your brakes. But in this case it's stuck too far, so this is why it needs replacing. Our new caliper just fits on in the reverse order which we took it off, so we rotate it on that thread just to make sure that we don't twist anything, and then we can nip it up with a spanner. Once that's nice and tight, we can remove the clamp stopping the flow of fluid to the caliper, and then we can fit the new discs and pads. Clean up the hub first with a wire brush, and then you can fit the new disc. Sometimes in storage these discs are coated in an oil, so it's a good idea to give them a wipe down before actually using them. And using the impact screwdriver which you use to take off that main bolt, we need to just nip it back up. So now we want to refit the pad carrier, but we've also got to use the thread lock on the bolts that secure it. When this sets in the thread, it just keeps the bolts tight and stops it from coming loose. But as always, check your tech data for the correct torque settings for these bolts. Before fitting the new pads, I like to put some grease on the lugs just to make sure that they slide into place and that they're well lubricated. But take care not to get any grease or any kind of lubricant on the pad surface or the brake surface of the disc. I also like to put a little bit of grease where the caliper is going to come in contact with the pads. With the pads in place, now we can fit the caliper, but you want to be careful with the handbrake cable. You want to put it in place, but you don't want to fit it fully because we haven't adjusted the calipers yet. So as you would normally, you can put this back in and use the two securing bolts to secure it into place. When you're happy that the caliper is tight, you can crack the bleed nipple and start to bleed the brakes. It's got a 10mm head, and on a new caliper like this it should loosen up nice and easy. So now we're going to attach a tool that will draw all the fluid and the air through the caliper and out of the system. Our aim is to bleed the system until there's no more bubbles in this pipe. When bleeding the brakes like this, it's important to not let the reservoir run dry, otherwise you run the risk of drawing air back into the system. When you're happy you've bled all the air out of the system, you want to tighten up that bleed nipple before disconnecting anything, just in case you let air back in. Every time you replace any brake component in your car, you want to make sure that you press the brake pedal before you do anything else. So once everything is fully back together, and in this case that we've bled the brake caliper, we want to make sure that the piston's in the correct position. So you want to press the brake pedal down as hard as you can, give it a couple of pumps, just to make sure that all the pistons that you've tampered with are now in the correct place. Also, now that we've pumped the pedal back and everything's in the right position, you can go ahead and now finish fitting the handbrake cable. In order to fit the cable, you've got to lift this arm back. When you lift that arm back, you're essentially activating the handbrake, and you don't want to do that until after you've pumped the pedal and everything is correctly aligned. If you activated the handbrake before doing any of this, you might cause further issues later on. Remember, it's a lot easier to do this now because we've de-adjusted the handbrake earlier on. So now when you're happy that this is tight and back into place, we can go back inside the car and adjust the handbrake back up. I normally like to have our handbrake holding on about 3 clicks. That's normally right for me. Once you've double checked that you haven't got any leaks and everything's nice and tight, you can refit the wheels and go out on road test. But before you leave the workshop, always remember that you need to torque those wheels down back to the factory settings, and you can find that information in your tech data. Okay, so we've just come back from road test. All the brakes are nice and bedded in, everything's working great. One thing I would say is after a road test, it's always a good idea to double check the caliper that we've fitted, just to make sure that the brake flexi, that there's no leaks, that everything is as it should be, but it's always worth double checking. Now that we've tested it out on the road, there's increased pressure on the brakes, something that we can't really replicate whilst in the workshop, so it's always a good idea to double check, and we have peace of mind. And that's it for this week's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and please stick around next week for another video. Stay safe.